Hello, students. Welcome back to chapter 7 on social stratification and social mobility. You probably noticed that last part of my lecture, I talk about different system of stratification. I probably did not follow the PowerPoint slide, but I'll show you a little bit on PowerPoint slide today. That's part I covered last week, and you probably see that ascribed and achieved status, and then different system of stratification. I did talk about slavery, caste, and today I'll be talking about estate and class system as well. So I'll start from estates. Estates were part of European feudalism, as you know that, but also existed in many other traditional civilizations. The feudal system, which was a land-based hierarchy, because that's determined by the land. States consisted of strata with differing obligations and rights towards each other. Some of these differences being established in law. So what happens on those feudal societies? Land was the defining factor in regards to the class of that society, who will be in the upper, middle, and lower, and different system in our stratification as well. So in Europe, the highest estate was composed of the aristocracy and gentry. So that was the highest, and the subsequent status were the clergy formed another state having lower status, but possessing various distinctive privileges. So you probably see the top, there was aristocracy and gentry, and then the clergy, and then the third one was the commoners, like serfs, free peasants, and merchants and artisans. In contrast to caste, you probably see that I talked about caste before. A certain degree of intermarriage and mobility was tolerated between the states. So mobility, I'll talk about mobility later part of my lecture, which is they can change from one status to another, one strata to another. And you probably see that commoners might be knighted, for example, in payment for the special services given to the monarch. Merchants could sometimes purchase titles as well. A rename of the system persisted in Britain, where hereditary titles are still recognized, though since 1999, peers are no longer automatically entitled to vote in the House of Lords. That used to be the case before, you can see that. And business leaders, civil servants, and others may be honored with a knighthood for their services. We see that's happened in the UK as well. The basis for the system was the nobles' ownership of land, as I discussed before, which was critical to their superior and privileged status. As in system based on slavery and caste, inheritance of one's position largely defined the state system. The nobles inherited their titles and property. The peasants were brought into a subservient position within an agrarian society. So that's the state system. The last one would be our system of stratification is class. I think Professor Shaidur Rahman discussed a lot about class from Karl Marx and Weber's view. But here I'll briefly talk about the system of class, social class as well. Class systems differ in many aspects from slavery, caste, or states. We can define a class as a large-scale grouping of people who share common economic resources, which strongly influence the type of lifestyle they are able to lead. Ownership of wealth and occupation are the chief basis of class differences. Class differ from early form of stratification in four main aspects. For example, class systems are fluid, class positions are in some parts are achieved, class is economically based, and also class system are large scale and impersonal. For example, according to Ogburn and Imhoff, a class is the aggregate of persons having essentially the same social status in a given society. And also Karl Marx and Engels indicated class is based on an economic differences. In the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Engels wrote, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. Marx and Engels describe classes as economic conflict groups which are divided on the basis of the possession of various instruments of production. So they are talking about mostly, the economy system. Before the Industrial Revolution, there were two classes we did see. One was landlord and serf. Serf is the agriculturalist. Since the main form of property was land, according to Marx, wealth Marx wealth determines the social status of the individual, and the basis of class stratification is the economic differences. So the presence of class conflicts in the societies we do see in primitive society, in slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism as well. So in summary, you can say that a class system is a social ranking based primarily on economic position in which achieved characteristics influence social mobility. Class systems are marked by unequal distribution of wealth and power, and through it is achieved heavily dependent on family, ascribed factors such as race and ethnicity. So those are the things we do see in our class system. So I just want to move from social stratification to social mobility, which is very important, identifying the social, stratification and how you can move from one class to another class as well, or one stratus to another. In studying stratification, we have to consider not only the differences between economic positions or occupations, but also what happens to the individuals who occupy them. The term social mobility refers, you probably see that I'll go and show you that part will cover by Shaidur Rahman, Professor Shaidur Rahman. So you probably see the term social mobility refers to the movement of individuals or groups from one position in a society's stratification system to the another. The ascent of a person from poor background to the position of prestige, for example, power or financial reward, is an example of social mobility. And there are also, you can see you see that the way social mobility happening, open and also closed stratification. An open system implies that the position of each individual is influenced by his or her achieved status. Such a system encourages competition among members of society. You probably see that the United States is moving towards this ideal type as the government attempts to reduce the barriers faced by women, racial and ethnic minorities, and people born in lower social classes. And the other example of social mobility is the closed system, which allow little or no possibility of individual social mobility. The slavery and caste system of stratification are example of closed system. In such society, social placement is based on ascribed status. You probably see that the open system is achieved and then the closed system is ascribed. And you also see that different types of social mobility. We do see horizontal, vertical, intergenerational, and intragenerational mobility as well. So an elementary school teacher who becomes a police officer moves from one social position to another of the same rank, which is the horizontal mobility. And however, if the teacher were to become a lawyer, or he or she would experience a vertical, so it means they are not going to the horizontal level, going from up or down. That could be the vertical mobility. So And also intergenerationally and intragenerationally, probably see that intergenerational mobility involves changes in the social position of children relating to their parents. Thus, a plumber whose father was a physician provides an employment of downward intergenerational mobility. A film star whose parents were both factory workers illustrates upward intergenerational mobility because education contributes significantly to upward mobility. And barrier to the pursuit of advanced degree can definitely limit intergenerational mobility. You probably see that been happening. And intergenerational mobility involves changes in social position within a person's adult life. It means like within our lifetimes, we can change our position as well. A woman who begins work as teacher, aide, or eventually becomes the superintendent of the school district experiences upward intergenerational mobility. Also, we can see a man who becomes a taxi or cab driver after his accounting firm goes bankrupt or or stop, undergo downward intergenerational mobility. So that we see that it can go upward or downward intergenerational mobility, and similarly intergenerational mobility as well. So we probably see that like there are so many impact of social mobility we do see in a different part of the world. You probably see some of the example provided here from the United States, the occupational mobility, the impact of education, the impact of race and ethnicity, the impact of gender. Because of education, because of the system in our society, people we do see they are moving upwards and downwards, and depends on their circumstances as well. And you also can see that government and poverty level, we do see the issues of government searching for right solution to welfare, and they are talking about whether the welfare will impact on their mobility from one strata or one group to another group as well, and also how much responsibility should poor assume. So if we wanted to help the poor people to move from one strata to another because of the social mobility and that sort of things, we see at the social policy level taken by different countries in the world as well. And I'm not going to talk a lot more about the United States. You probably see that shift in U.S. welfare program in 1996. Most countries devote high proportions of expenditure to housing, social security, welfare, healthcare, and unemployment compensations as well. So those are the things happening, and by investing money on those sectors, they try to uplift one class or one status from one to the next level, which we say social mobility as well. So by discussing about that, I would like to conclude my lecture here on social stratification and social mobility. I hope you guys enjoyed this class, and also